What if the reason you're tired isn't because life is too hard, but because you're gripping too tightly to things that were never yours to carry? Ever feel like you're constantly fighting battles that drain your soul, but deep down, you don't even know why? This might hurt a little, but it's not your workload that's breaking you. It's your illusions. You're not exhausted from life. You're exhausted from trying to control it. You carry burdens that were never yours to hold. You overthink every conversation, seek validation from people who don't even respect themselves, and chase outcomes you were never meant to dictate. You try to predict moods, fix the future, and manage everyone else's chaos. But the cost? Your peace. You're not worn out from hard work. You're worn out from the illusion that you have control over anything outside of yourself. They taught you to grip tightly, to care deeply about what others think, to always anticipate, calculate, manage, and manipulate. And slowly, your mind became a battlefield you could never escape. But here's the truth they never taught you. The tighter you grip, the faster it slips. Real power begins the moment you let go. Not because you're giving up, but because you finally understood. Control is the cage, detachment is the key. Not emotional numbness yet, but emotional intelligence. Not running away one, but drawing boundaries so strong chaos no longer enters without permission. From this moment on, you don't react, you respond. You don't chase, you choose. You don't beg for peace, you become it. Because the fewer things that own your mind, the more unshakable you become. I hold nothing, nothing holds me. This is the shift only 1% of people ever make, from being controlled to becoming free. Now let's begin. You don't find peace by controlling the world. You find it by mastering yourself. That's what the Stoics knew. They didn't preach detachment just to sound profound. They practiced it because they had to. For them, it was survival. Because what happens when your sense of peace is tied to things that shift like the wind? A single delay, a sharp comment, one rejection, and suddenly you're spiraling. Why? Because your peace was never rooted in you. It was anchored in the chaos around you. Now bring that into modern life. If your mood today depends on whether someone praises you, if your plan runs smoothly, if your post gets enough likes, if the market aligns perfectly with your ambition, then you're not in control. You're being controlled by approval, by chance, by conditions you can't govern. And here's the quiet tragedy. Most people never even realize they've built their identity on rented land. They become emotional landlords, constantly negotiating. With tenants they can't evict. This is the starting point of emotional intelligence. Not suppressing your emotions, but understanding where they come from. Not needing to dominate every room you enter, but knowing which rooms are worth stepping into in the first place. Emotional mastery begins the moment you stop tying your worth to things outside your control. You don't need to control everything. To be calm, you only need to master one thing. How you choose to interpret what happens, that's where true power lives. Here's your shift. Don't ask, why is this happening to me? Start asking, is this even mine to control? If the answer is no, release it. Not because you're weak, but because you're wise, because you care so deeply about what truly matters, your energy, your clarity, your direction. That's what real resilience is, not pretending to be fine, but staying centered when outcomes are unknown, staying rooted when the world refuses to go your way. That's the difference between those who panic and those who lead themselves. So next time life doesn't go your way, don't chase control, chase clarity. Ask the Stoic question: what is within my power? If the answer is nothing, then you already know what to do. Let go, move on. You've been conditioned to invest your entire sense of self into things outside of you. Your job, your goals, your relationships, your image. But here's the paradox. The more you invest outward, the more fragile you become inward, because every time you attach your peace to something external, you hand over the keys to your emotional stability. That's not strength. That's emotional outsourcing. The Stoics understood this deeply. They never aimed to control the world. They focused on the one domain they truly owned: themselves. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Marcus Aurelius, they weren't escapists. They were architects, not of walls, but of fortresses, built within. And that is now your task. Not to tame the world's chaos, but to create such solid inner order that chaos never makes it past your gate. Because here's the truth: you can lose the job. You can be insulted, betrayed, overlooked. But if your inner system is strong enough, you don't fall. You adapt. That's where most high performers get it wrong. They think resilience is about trying harder, but Stoic resilience is about becoming unshakable because you're rooted in something deeper than circumstances. Picture your mind as a fortress, cold, silent, secure. Not because you don't feel, but because you filter. Not because you suppress emotion, but because you govern it. Your thoughts, your attention, your emotional energy. These are your currency. And like any wise ruler, you don't hand out your resources to anyone who knocks at the gate. Self-leadership begins the moment you stop reacting to the world and start commanding your inner world. So let me ask you, when someone disrespects you, do you collapse? When your plans fall apart, and do you spiral? When people pull away, do you chase after them begging for validation? If the answer is yes, then maybe your fortress has cracks. When you begin strengthening your inner world, you no longer react to life. You begin to command yourself. And the first thing to remember is, don't panic. This isn't about guilt. It's about strategy. You don't build inner peace in a single night. You build it like a general fortifying a fortress, brick by brick. You build it through discipline in your habits, through precision in your thoughts, through silence, especially when the world demands your reaction, through boundaries when everyone wants your attention for free. Emotional intelligence isn't the absence of emotion. It's the mastery of emotional focus. And once you master that, you become unreadable, unshakable, and that's where real dominance begins. Not in being the loudest voice in the room, but in being the calmest presence in chaos. Not in controlling others, but in being so composed that no one can control you. Most people crumble because they've never learned how to sit with themselves. But you will learn to fortify your solitude, not to escape the world, but to lead yourself through it. So ask yourself, is your inner world strong enough to withstand the storms you can't predict? If not, then it's time to build. Because the world doesn't need more reactors. It needs more fortresses. Picture your mind as a sacred stronghold. Now ask yourself, how many back doors have you left open? How many people have free access to your peace? How many useless thoughts are walking through your gates without permission? How much time and attention have you wasted on things that offer zero strategic return? This is the uncomfortable truth. Most people don't control their thoughts. Their thoughts control them. They wake up and immediately reach for their phones. They let headlines, comments, and algorithms hijack their attention. They absorb the chaos of the world. and then wonder why they can't stay calm. That's not intelligence. That's internal anarchy. The Stoics had a word for the opposite of that chaos, eudaimonia, a state of flourishing. But how can you flourish when your mind constantly leaks focus? Epictetus once said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." What does that mean? Stop decorating your mind for approval. Start defending it with discipline. Mental discipline is not suppression, it's selection. You don't try to block every thought, you choose which ones are allowed to stay. You train your brain like an elite unit. Weak thoughts? Discarded victim beliefs? Deleted emotional noise? Muted regret about the past? Cut fantasy you can't influence? Replaced with action. You treat your attention like capital and invest it only where the return is clarity, control, or growth. Let's make it practical. Whenever a thought arises, ask, does this serve my mission? Is this in my control? Will this matter in 10 minutes or 10 years? Am I focused on what's real or reacting to someone else's illusion? If the answer is no, you don't entertain it. You eliminate it. Because every time you indulge a worthless thought, you are feeding the very disorder that keeps you anxious, tired, and reactive. And here's the truth no one talks about. Discipline is the foundation of peace. Without it, even meditation becomes a performance. Even calm becomes temporary. That's why high-performance thinkers don't rely on motivation. They rely on filtration. They set psychological boundaries like a fortress commander, with intention and precision. When you begin guarding your thoughts like a gatekeeper, you shift from being controlled to becoming the one in command. Not everything deserves entry. Not everyone deserves your attention. Not every emotion deserves analysis. And not every comment deserves a reply. In today's world, attention is the new gold, and your role is to become a strategic investor, not an emotional gambler. So the next time your mind starts spiraling, pause. Don't believe everything you feel. Don't blindly trust every thought that pops into your head. You are not your thoughts, you are the commander of them. That's what real emotional intelligence looks like. Not being calm for 10 minutes in meditation, but being in charge of your internal state hour by hour, especially when the outside world gets loud. Most people are walking around with their mental gates wide open, then wondering why they constantly feel drained. But you're building something different. A mind that doesn't just survive in chaos, but thrives within it. And that starts with the discipline to say, this thought doesn't serve me. It stops here. Because every thought you master adds another brick to a mental fortress that no storm can shake. Think about it. The world is full of emotional landmines, disrespect, manipulation, screaming, betrayal. And every time you react, argue, explain, justify, you're broadcasting your weakness. You're showing people exactly which buttons to press, and worse, you're handing them the remote. The Stoics weren't passive. They were powerful because they chose when and how to respond. They didn't react to insults. They observed them. They didn't panic in chaos. They breathed through it because they understood a truth that most never learn. Reaction is submission. Observation is dominance. When someone disrespects you and you snap, you lose. When someone provokes you and you retaliate, you confirm their power. But when you respond with calm, measured silence, you become unreadable, unpredictable, untouchable. And that terrifies people far more than any loud outburst ever could. High-performance arenas, leadership, negotiations, strategy, elite sports. The person who stays calm the longest controls the room. That's not passivity. That's psychological warfare. So how do you train non-reaction? Here's the truth. You don't react by default. You pause by design. Between every stimulus and response, there's a moment, a pause, a decision point. And in that split second, your power is forged. That's the moment you choose to act with intention or emotion, to lead the interaction or fall into it, to operate from inner mastery or outer chaos. Most people never use that pause. They're emotional landmines, waiting to be triggered, but you turn that pause into a weapon. Let me be clear. Not reacting doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you don't perform for people who haven't earned your energy. Let them wonder. Let them guess. Let them spin their own stories, because while they unravel, you're calculating. That's psychological asymmetry, and it's powerful. This is why emotional regulation is a form of executive strength. It's not weakness, it's elite-level mental control. You don't flinch, you don't panic, you don't need to win the moment. You're not playing for ego, you're playing for dominion. So next time someone disrespects you, don't react. Pause. Be silent. Let your silence speak. Let their fire burn itself out, trying to melt your ice. Because the one who remains calm as the room heats up, that's the one everyone starts to watch and fear. Marcus Aurelius said, "If someone provokes you, remember, it is your choice whether or not to be disturbed." And that choice, made again and again, is what separates the Stoic warrior from the emotional puppet. There's a kind of strength the world often misjudges, the strength to walk away, not out of anger, not out of fear, but out of absolute clarity. People think detachment means coldness. It doesn't. Detachment is precision. It's refusing to bleed for things that don't serve your mind or your mission. You don't walk away because you don't care. You walk away because you care too much about your energy, your peace, and your direction. When you learn to step back with purpose and silence, you don't become weaker, you reclaim control. Protecting your time and your peace is not emotional weakness. It's mental sovereignty. He who is brave is free. Seneca. And nothing requires more bravery than letting go, cleanly, without rage, without explanation. Strategic detachment means this: you don't chase closure, you create it. You don't explain your standards, you enforce them. You don't get consumed by what crumbles, you step over the ruins and move forward. Let's be honest. Most people carry emotional deadweight, friendships that drain them, relationships that manipulate them, goals that were never truly theirs, expectations they inherited but never chose. They keep trying to fix what was broken by design. But here's the truth. You can't save what's committed to self-destruction. You can't control outcomes built on instability. And you are not obligated to keep bleeding for a story that no longer fits your future. At its highest form, detachment is self-respect, practiced with precision. You set your own exit points. You decide where your focus goes and where it doesn't. And when a person, situation, or thought no longer aligns with your standards, you cut it off. Not with cruelty, but with calculated finality. Not everyone deserves closure. Not every moment deserves a reaction. And not every loss is a tragedy. Some are liberation in disguise. Here's the rule of high-performance self-discipline. Never attach to anything you cannot walk away from in 5 seconds if it compromises your clarity, your code, or your peace of mind. This isn't detachment from people. It's detachment from dependency. It means being involved but not entangled, caring but never collapsing, feeling everything but being owned by nothing. This mindset makes you faster than those still overthinking, cleaner than those drowning in drama. Sharper than those addicted to closure, detachment is what allows you to move like a ghost, silent, efficient, unstoppable. Drop this in the comments. I walk light. I cut sharp. I owe nothing to what drains me. This is emotional. Minimalism, this is tactical indifference. This is your power. Most people think power is presence, being seen, being loud, being everywhere. But true power is about being missed. The moment you learn to disappear on purpose is the moment you stop playing their game and start rewriting the board. Absence is a psychological weapon, and most people are unarmed against it. In a world addicted to attention, the one who withdraws theirs becomes untouchable. Why? Because people expect your energy. They crave your reaction. They feed on your presence, so when you remove it, you create a vacuum. A silence, a question mark. Why did they go quiet? What are they planning? Did I lose access to them forever? That's not confusion, that's control. The Stoics understood the art of stepping back, not out of weakness, but out of strategic stillness. Nowhere you can go is more peaceful than your own soul. But peace isn't passive, it's positioning. Marcus Aurelius. So what happens when you practice strategic absence? You break their rhythm, you force reflection, you create uncertainty, you regain leverage. You're no longer reacting to the world, you're redirecting it simply by stepping back just enough to disrupt the balance. Let's get tactical. When someone disrespects you, don't fight. Go silent. When a situation turns toxic, don't over-explain. Vanish. When energy becomes chaotic, don't beg for peace. Exit. And become peace itself. That silence, it becomes a mirror. They see themselves in it, and often they can't stand the reflection. Remember this law of the executive mindset. The more available you are, the more expendable you become. Your scarcity builds demand. Your silence builds mystery. Your absence builds power. Not because they fear you'll return with force, but because they realize they lost access to something they never fully understood. At this level, emotional, intelligence isn't about controlling others. It's about becoming so centered, no one else can control you. When you're so in control of yourself that others can't afford to lose your presence. And yet, you make them live without. It seems that's the pinnacle of strategic detachment. That's high-performance detachment. That's luxury-level leadership. Comment this now. My absence is a mirror. My silence is control. You've already learned how to detach. Now, you've learned how to disappear with leverage. Because if they can read you, they can reach you. And if they can reach you, they can control you. That's why the Stoic doesn't just stay calm, he becomes unreadable. In a world where everyone is oversharing, posting every thought, every feeling, every fleeting moment, the one who shares nothing becomes terrifying. People don't fear your strength. They fear what they can't predict. So here's the question. Do you leave trails or do you vanish into mystery? Most people broadcast their insecurity through nervous laughter, over-explaining, desperate messages, passive-aggressive responses, and trying way too hard to appear confident. They narrate every emotion. They reveal their weaknesses. They become easy to map. But you're going dark. Not because you're hollow inside, but because your depth has no surface to cling to. Psychological power begins where predictability ends. Think like a strategist. The more information you reveal, the easier you are to defeat. The more emotion you leak, the more leverage they gain. The more you defend yourself, the more they know where to strike. That's why stillness is not just silence, it's structure. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts, but if you expose every thought, you let the world repaint your mind." The Stoic guards his thoughts like a general protects his fortress. Every word is chosen. Every gesture is intentional. Every silence is designed. So how do you become unreadable in real life? Say less than you know. Only speak when your words serve the outcome. Train your expression. Your face should be neutral, not numb, calm, not cold. Let them guess. Let them misunderstand. Let them assume. You don't correct. You collect. Because the more you're misunderstood, the more you hold the power of ambiguity. You owe no one access to your inner world. You don't have to explain your standards. You don't have to justify your silence. You don't have to argue for your worth. Let your discipline speak. Let your absence ask the questions. Let your stillness become legend. Because when you're unreadable, you're unshakable. This is mental warfare at the highest level. Not because you manipulate others, but because you refuse to be manipulated. You don't react, you respond when it's strategic. You don't reveal, you observe. You stay in command, fully. Comment this now. They can't play what they can't read. My silence is my sword. And we're not done yet, because in the final chapter, we reach the highest state a Stoic mind can achieve, the untouchable state. Not emotionless, not cold, but forged through fire and no longer flinching. Let's go. When you become unreadable and untouchable, you don't just control the situation, you've entered the untouchable state. You were taught that strength means controlling everything. But the truly elite, the spiritually disciplined, the mentally ruthless, they know a higher truth. You don't control the world. You control your need to control it. To enter the untouchable state, you must kill certain things within yourself. Your hunger for validation, your addiction to being understood, your impulse to defend your character, your emotional dependency on being seen, chosen, or liked. This isn't just emotional intelligence. This is spiritual discipline. You become the version of yourself that no longer negotiates with weakness. You sit inside yourself like a general in command, calm, focused, unavailable to chaos. Let me be clear. The untouchable state is not about being cold. It's not about shutting down or going numb. It's about being impenetrable without being disconnected. You still love. You still care. But you don't collapse when life doesn't go your way. You don't beg for closure. You become the closure. You don't chase peace. You are the peace. At this level of self-mastery, you become a living paradox. Warm but unreadable. Present but unattached, fully aware, but owned by nothing. That's why this state is so rare. It demands that you trade comfort for clarity and exchange chaos for command. Here's the irony. When you stop needing to be understood, people start respecting you. When you stop explaining, you begin moving in silence. And when you no longer flinch, they realize nothing can break you. Apply this in your real life. Someone insults you, you don't even register it. Their words can't touch the identity you forged in solitude. Someone ghosts you. You don't spiral, you simply return to center. You lose something, or someone. You adjust your perimeter, not your self-worth. You don't fall apart. You refine, you redirect, you rise sharper. The untouchable state is also your highest performing self. Why? Because when your mind is no longer hijacked by emotion, you move with surgical precision. You're not rushing to prove. You're not reacting to bait. You're not chasing what was never meant for you. Every move becomes clean, calculated, high impact. That's what leaders, visionaries, and warriors all have in common. They don't just move, they move from a place of inner command. This isn't just Stoicism anymore. It's your operating system. You no longer adapt your peace to the world. You make the world adjust to your peace. You become the one who now walks into chaos without blinking, is whispered about in rooms you've already left. Doesn't play the game anymore because you've learned to rewrite the rules. Comment this now. My peace is not a negotiation. My mind is my kingdom. You've made it this far because you were ready. You didn't skip steps, you didn't shatter, you stayed in the fire until only steel remained. From this moment forward, you don't just practice Stoicism, you embody it. Not through noise, not through performance, but through a silence that shakes the room. You are now untouchable. And that is your true freedom. In a world where emotional overload is normalized, emotional minimalism is a radical act. Most people live with their emotions on the outside, exposed, vulnerable, manipulated. They react to every comment, every silence, every shift in someone else's mood, as if it's a threat to their existence. But a Stoic mind learns to strip all that away, to move light, to cut clean, to stop bleeding for what no longer belongs. Letting go doesn't mean you didn't care. It means you refused to carry what was never yours to hold. Let's be clear. You weren't born to carry everyone's expectations, emotions, or consequences. You weren't meant to fix what's broken by design. You don't need to justify your peace to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You were meant to master yourself. That's it. Everything else, their noise, their opinions, their drama, that's external. It's just background static. And if you don't learn to mute it, it will run your life. The storm won't stop. The world won't quiet down. But when your inner world becomes louder, clearer, and calmer, you no longer flinch. You lead because that noise, that static. If you don't learn to mute it, it will drown out your mission. It will rob your clarity and exhaust your spirit. So let's be clear. What is emotional minimalism? It's not apathy. It's not coldness. It's clarity. It's the discipline of saying my energy is not cheap, my peace is not negotiable, and my boundaries are not up for debate. Picture your emotional energy as currency. Most people spend it like spare change, on pointless arguments, on people who drain more than they give, on outcomes they'll never control. But high-performance minds? They treat energy like capital. They invest it where it multiplies. They cut losses without apology. This is where Stoicism becomes emotional intelligence in motion, because once you stop needing to be understood, you gain the freedom to move silently. You gain the strength to walk away without explanation. You realize peace is not something you chase, it's something you protect. And anything that costs your peace, it's simply too expensive. The moment you stop leaking energy into battles that don't belong to you, you start building a mind that cannot be broken. Try this practice. When the urge to reply comes, pause. When your heart wants to hold on, pause. When your mind spirals with made-up scenarios, pause. Ask yourself, does this deserve my energy, my voice, my presence? If the answer is no, let it go. Clean cut. No bleeding, no begging, no story. Because emotional minimalism doesn't make you heartless. It makes you harder to disturb, not out of fear, but out of self-respect. You don't need to be loud to be powerful. You don't need to earn worth by being endlessly patient with the wrong people. You don't need to fight battles that don't reward your growth. You only need to be precise with your attention, with your energy, with your emotion. So start now. Stop writing paragraphs to people who ignore your sentences. Stop watering connections that leave you dry. Stop giving emotional access to people who weaponize your care. This is the sharp edge of emotional intelligence. It's not soft, it's not sweet, it's strategic. Say less. Care wisely, let go early, because bleeding for what you can't control isn't noble. It's self-abandonment, and you're not here to abandon yourself. You're here to master yourself. Comment this. I protect my peace like a fortress, I cut clean, I carry nothing that cuts me. There comes a point on the Stoic path where you don't flinch at the storm. Not because it's quieter, but because you've become louder inside. You don't react. You don't explain. You don't prove. You hold. That's what mastery looks like. Stillness in motion, presence under pressure, discipline under fire, and the truth. The world won't get easier. People won't suddenly get wiser, kinder, or more consistent, but that was never the requirement. What's required, what will always be required, is that you change. You become untouchable, not by force but by design. You don't escape the world. You rise above its noise. You don't fight for power, you become the source of it. This final state is not about control. It's about command, not over others, but over the only battlefield that ever mattered, your inner world. Here's the paradox. The less you try to control, the more powerful you become. Because true influence, it doesn't shout, it doesn't broadcast, it simply exists and shifts every room it enters. So what does that look like? Today's man who doesn't chase status because he's grounded in purpose. A woman who doesn't over-explain because she moves with precision. A leader who doesn't need to raise their voice because their presence alone speaks. Your final form. It's not about being perfect. It's about being consistent in your values, in your code, in your discipline. The person who lives by a code becomes immune to chaos. Why? Because chaos feeds on reaction, and your silence is the lock it can't break. Now you live by the highest standard, self-governance. You no longer rent your identity to opinions, trends, or moods. You no longer give your peace away like a free sample. You guard it like territory. You're not cold. You're calibrated. You're not distant. You're deliberate. You're not heartless. You're disciplined. This is your new standard. This is your code. This is where chaos meets its match and loses. Comment this now. I don't follow peace, I become it. From this moment on, move like a mind that cannot be shaken, because you've trained for this, because you've earned this, because you've become something they can't touch. Let this be the final truth engraved into your mind. You were never meant to control everything. You were meant to control yourself. Absolutely. Let them chase applause. Let them drown in toys. Let them burn out trying to fix what was never theirs to fix. You choose clarity over chaos. You move with precision. You cut what doesn't serve. You lead in silence. Not out of fear of conflict, but because you've mastered the only war that matters, the one within. You don't react. You respond. You don't cling. You release. You don't explain. You execute. And now you walk forward. Unreadable, unshakable, untouchable, because once you detach from everything you can't control, you become unstoppable from within. If this message didn't just hit your ears, but hit your code, don't just like this video. Live it, own it, become it. Subscribe for more high-performance Stoic training. Share this with someone who needs to stop bleeding energy into what they can't control. Drop a comment now. I control myself. I release the rest. This is life through Stoicism. We don't escape the storm. We become the calm inside it.